After years of grappling with relentless challenges and a high-pressure job, I made a drastic shift to working at a charming candy store called Sugar Haven, alongside my friend Ben. The transition was jarring yet refreshing. My previous role had me constantly troubleshooting crises, drowning in spreadsheets, and racing against deadlines. Now, I found myself enveloped in the delightful aroma of sugary confections, surrounded by jars of vibrant candies and shelves of delectable chocolates. It was a world away from my old life, and I welcomed the change with open arms. Ben's family owned Sugar Haven, a quaint shop that had been a neighborhood staple for decades. At first, I was just helping out behind the counter, but my knack for numbers soon led me to manage the store's finances. Under our care, the shop flourished. Sales soared, especially after we introduced a new line of artisanal chocolates that customers couldn't resist. One crisp Monday morning, Ben greeted me with his signature warm smile as I stepped into the store. Despite a subtle undercurrent of tension in the air, something I couldn't quite pinpoint, his grin was enough to lift my spirits. "Morning, Anna," he said, his voice bright. "You won't believe this, but our sales are up again. Those new chocolates are a hit." I beamed, pride swelling in my chest. I noticed. People can't get enough of them. But as I spoke, I caught a flicker of unease in Ben's expression. He chuckled, though it felt forced, and made a half-hearted joke about his mother, Linda, still believing he was the ultimate authority when it came to running the candy store. I laughed lightly, but the mention of Linda made me wary. She had a way of stirring the pot. As if on cue, Linda swept into the shop, her presence commanding attention. She wore a tailored blazer that screamed expense, and her eyes scanned the store with a proprietary air. "Good morning, Benjamin, my dear," she said, her tone dripping with affection as she patted Ben's cheek. Then her gaze landed on me, and her smile tightened. "And Anna. Keeping busy, I see." "Good morning, Linda," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I was used to her subtle jabs by now, but they still stung. Linda didn't miss a beat. "You know, Anna, you're doing fine with the little tasks, but the business side of things is best left to the experts. Focus on supporting Ben with the real work, dear." Her words were cloaked in politeness, but the implication was clear. I was an outsider meddling in their family's domain. I bit back a retort, my jaw tightening. Before I could respond, Ben jumped in, his tone firm yet kind. "Actually, Mom, Anna's been incredible with the business stuff. We're doing better than ever because of her." He slipped an arm around my shoulders, a quiet show of solidarity that warmed my heart. Linda's eyes narrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. "As long as you're happy, Benjamin, that's what matters," she said with a dismissive wave before sauntering out of the shop. Ben shot me an apologetic look once she was gone. "Sorry about her," he murmured. "She doesn't mean it." I shrugged, trying to brush it off. "It's fine. Let's just focus on the shop." But deep down, I knew Linda's words weren't just idle comments. They were a reminder of the delicate balance I was trying to maintain in this family-run business. Sugar Haven wasn't just a candy store anymore. It was our sanctuary, a place where Ben and I poured our hearts into creating something special. But as the weeks passed, cracks began to appear in our sweet little world. Deliveries started arriving more frequently, but they weren't the usual crates of candy or baking supplies. Instead, they were boxes containing extravagant items, high-end electronics, designer furniture, even a sleek new espresso machine that looked wildly out of place in our modest back office. Each delivery chipped away at my peace of mind, raising red flags about our financial stability. One evening, as I was locking up, I caught Ben unboxing a shiny new smartphone, its sleek design glinting under the shop's fluorescent lights. My stomach twisted. "Ben, is that really necessary?" I asked, trying to keep my tone measured. "We've got other priorities, like fixing the leaking faucet in the back or updating the shop signage." He waved off my concern with a casual grin. "Come on, Anna. We deserve to treat ourselves sometimes. The store's doing great." His nonchalance grated on me, but I let it slide, hoping it was a one-off. It wasn't. Linda, too, seemed to be indulging in a spending spree. She'd breeze into the shop wearing a new outfit almost every day, each one more extravagant than the last. One afternoon, she twirled in a floral dress that looked like it belonged on a Paris runway. "Look at this, Anna. Isn't it divine?" she gushed, her eyes sparkling with pride. "It's nice," I said, forcing a smile. "But shouldn't we prioritize fixing the shop's front sign? It's starting to fade, and customers have noticed." Linda laughed, a tinkling sound that set my teeth on edge. "Nonsense, dear. The store is thriving. Benjamin, tell her." She reached over to pat Ben's cheek, who was distractedly restocking a candy display. "Yeah, Anna, we're fine," he mumbled, barely glancing up. "Don't worry so much." But worrying was exactly what I did. Every time I reviewed our financial records, the numbers told a troubling story. Our profits were being eroded by personal expenses, Linda's wardrobe, Ben's gadgets, and other unnecessary purchases. The term "doing great" felt like a hollow mantra when our bottom line was shrinking. "We need to be cautious," I said to Ben one evening as we sat in the office, poring over the books. "Maybe we should set a budget for personal spending to keep things under control." Ben looked at me as if I'd suggested we sell the shop. "A budget? Come on, Anna, we're not that bad. And since when are you so stingy?" The word hit me like a slap. "Stingy?" I repeated, my voice sharp. "This isn't about being stingy, Ben. It's about being responsible. We have to think about Sugar Haven's future." He sighed, already distracted by a website on his laptop, scrolling through listings for yet another purchase. "You worry too much," he said, his tone dismissive. "It'll all work out." Things took a sharper turn when Linda made a unilateral decision to hire extra help. It was a Tuesday, our usual inventory day, and I was knee-deep in organizing candy jars when Linda waltzed in with a young woman trailing behind her. "Anna, meet Tessa," Linda announced, her voice brimming with pride. "Tessa, this is Anna, my son's assistant." I straightened, wiping my hands on my apron, and offered a polite smile. "Nice to meet you, Tessa. But just to clarify, I'm the co-manager here, not an assistant." Tessa's smile was tight, not quite reaching her eyes. "I've heard so much about you," she said, her tone neutral. "I'm excited to join the team." I glanced at Linda, whose smug expression told me she hadn't bothered to consult Ben, or me, about this new hire. "What exactly will Tessa be doing?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Oh, she'll help with the business side of things," Linda said airily, glancing at my inventory list as if it were a trivial scribble. "You can only do so much, Anna." I nodded, masking my frustration. "All right. Well, we have a system in place, so I'll need to bring her up to speed." But it quickly became clear that Tessa's idea of helping involved hovering over my shoulder and asking endless questions without contributing much. When I discovered the salary Linda had set for her, a figure far higher than we could justify for her role, I was floored. "Ben, we need to talk," I said, cornering him in the office later that day. He was glued to his computer, as usual. "Tessa's salary is way too high for what she's doing. We can't afford this." He looked up, his brow furrowing. "Mom said it was fine. She thinks Tessa's going to bring a lot to the table." I exhaled sharply, feeling like I was talking to a wall. But we agreed to discuss new hires together, especially when it comes to their pay. This wasn't part of the plan. Ben shrugged, that infuriatingly dismissive gesture becoming all too familiar. "What's done is done. Mom has a good feeling about her." "Good feelings don't balance the books," I muttered under my breath, but I didn't push further. I left the office feeling like I was the only one seeing the storm clouds gathering over Sugar Haven while Ben and Linda danced in blissful ignorance. I've always been meticulous, the kind of person who double-checks everything, especially when it comes to numbers. So when I found an envelope tucked in the back of a filing cabinet while searching for a misplaced invoice, I assumed it was just another overlooked bill. But as I sifted through the documents inside, my heart began to race. Not with excitement, but with a chilling sense of dread. It was a loan agreement, with Sugar Haven listed as collateral. The amount was staggering, far beyond what a small candy store could justify. "Ben," I said, storming into his cluttered office with the papers clutched in my hand. "What is this?" He glanced up, and for the first time in months, I saw guilt flicker in his eyes. Oh, that? It's nothing. Just a small loan I took out for, store improvements. Store improvements? I echoed, my voice rising with disbelief. This amount could renovate the shop 5 times over. What did you really use it for? There was a long pause, and I could see him scrambling for words. Okay, look, he said, finally, his tone defensive. I might have used some of it for the house, the one I've been working on for us. For us? I repeated, my voice sharp with incredulity. Or for your gadgets and whatever else you've been splurging on? He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor, a sound that grated on my already frayed nerves. It's not like that, Anna. You don't understand. This is all going to pay off in the end. No, Ben. I shot back, my patience snapping. Taking out a loan against the store without telling me. That's what I don't understand. How could you be so reckless? Before he could respond, Linda bustled in, her nose wrinkling as she spotted the papers in my hand. What's all this about? She demanded. Ben started to explain, but I cut him off, thrusting the loan documents toward her. Did you know about this? She barely glanced at the papers before waving them away. Of course I did. Ben's just doing what's necessary for our future. And who are you to question him? You're just the help, after all. The words hit me like a punch, but they also ignited a fire within me. Just the help, I said, my voice low but steady. I've been keeping this store afloat while you two treat it like your personal bank account. What's ungrateful is not recognizing the work I've put into this business. What's foolish is risking everything for a house we don't even need. I waited for them to respond, to offer some defense, but they just stared at me, caught in the weight of their own actions. I turned and left the room, the documents still in my hand, feeling like a verdict waiting to be delivered. Days later, we gathered around the kitchen table in the back of the shop, an impromptu meeting that felt more like a tribunal. Ben, Linda, and I sat in tense silence, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. Ben cleared his throat, his eyes avoiding mine. We need to talk about the store's future. I folded my hands on the table, my voice calm but firm. We already did that when I found the loan documents. Linda huffed, her arms crossed tightly. We need to be realistic, Anna. The store isn't pulling in enough to cover the debts. We have to find money somewhere. There it was, the we that really meant you. I met her gaze, unflinching. What do you suggest? Her eyes gleamed with a cold calculation, and I braced myself for what was coming next. The kitchen table, once a place for casual chats over coffee, now felt like a battlefield. Linda's words hung in the air, sharp and calculating. You have that inheritance from your parents. It could cover the debts and get the store back on its feet. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were suggesting I pick up an extra shift, not surrender the financial legacy my parents had left me. I stared at her, my mind reeling. This wasn't the woman whose son I had married, the woman who had welcomed me into her family with warm hugs and promises of partnership. This was a stranger, her eyes gleaming with expectation. You want me to use my parents' money? I said, my voice trembling with disbelief. The money they left for me, for my future? Ben, who had been silent until now, shifted in his seat, his gaze flickering between me and his mother. It's not like you're doing anything else with it, Anna, he said, his words slicing through me. It's just sitting there. I turned to him, my heart pounding. That money was meant for my security, Ben. My future. I could barely believe the words coming out of his mouth. The man I had stood beside, who had vowed to build a life with me, was now treating my inheritance like a communal piggy bank. Linda leaned forward, her lips pursed. And what about our security, Anna? You're part of this family now, aren't you? Her tone was laced with accusation, as if my hesitation was a betrayal of some unspoken pact. I looked between them, my chest tightening as the weight of their expectations pressed down on me. I am part of this family, I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. But it seems you only remember that when you need something from me. Ben shifted uncomfortably, his fingers drumming on the table. It's not like that, Anna. We're drowning here. The store, the debts, it's all falling apart. We need help. So, you expect me to just hand over my future just like that? I asked, my voice rising. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with tension. I thought of the sacrifices I had already made for Sugar Haven, the late nights balancing books, the weekends spent scrubbing counters, the countless hours I'd poured into keeping the shop afloat while Ben and Linda treated it like their personal playground. Linda's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp. If you care about this family, yes. That's exactly what we expect. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. An idea took root, one born of both desperation and defiance. If I do this, I said slowly, if I invest my inheritance to save the store, I want a third of the business. I want to be an official co-owner, with equal say in how things are run. The room fell silent, the weight of my demand settling over us like a heavy fog. Then Linda laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed off the walls. You a co-owner? She said, her voice dripping with disdain. Don't be ridiculous, Anna. You're not business material. Her words were a slap, but I refused to flinch. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor, the sound cutting through the tension like a blade. Then you find another way to cover your debts, I said, my voice low and firm. Because my inheritance is not your emergency fund. Ben's face was unreadable, a mix of guilt and frustration, but Linda's cheeks flushed red with anger. You'd let this family business go under? She spat, her voice rising. After everything we've done for you? I've tried to save it, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. I've worked harder than anyone to keep Sugar Haven alive. But I won't set myself on fire to keep you warm. I turned and walked out, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the silence, leaving them to grapple with the mess they'd created. That evening, an uneasy feeling gnawed at my gut, urging me to return to Sugar Haven. I wasn't one for late-night visits to the shop, but something, call it instinct or suspicion, pulled me there. The storefront was dark, the neon open sign long since turned off, but a faint glow spilled from the back office, casting eerie shadows across the candy displays. I pushed open the door, the familiar tinkle of the bell sounding almost ominous in the stillness. The sweet scent of confectionery, which had once been a comfort, now felt heavy, tinged with the bitter weight of betrayal. As I moved toward the back, soft murmurs grew clearer, and my heart began to race. Through the partially open office door, I saw them. Ben, with his arms wrapped around Tessa, the new assistant Linda had hired. She giggled at something he whispered, her head tilted close to his. The sight hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to stay calm. I pushed the door open fully, and it creaked on its hinges, announcing my presence. They sprang apart, their faces transforming from intimacy to shock in an instant. Anna, Ben stammered, hastily straightening his rumpled shirt. What are you? It's not what it looks like. I crossed my arms, a cold calm settling over me like a shield. Really? I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. Because it looks like I just caught my husband with his arms around another woman. Tessa fidgeted, smoothing her hair and avoiding my gaze, her cheeks flushed with guilt. We were just going over inventory, she mumbled, the excuse so flimsy it was almost laughable. At midnight, I said, my tone dry. With the inventory in your arms? The absurdity of their lie would have been funny if it hadn't been so painful. Ben took a step toward me, his eyes pleading. Anna, please, you're blowing this out of proportion. It was nothing. I laughed, a short, humorless sound that echoed in the small office. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks crystal clear. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of what I'd seen, but because of the lies, the dismissal, the way Ben had been slipping further and further away from the man I thought I knew. Tessa finally spoke, her voice small and trembling. I'm sorry, Anna. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I turned to her, really looking at her for the first time. She was young, naive, caught in the web of a man who couldn't take responsibility for his actions. You should be, I said, my voice firm but not cruel. And you should also start looking for another job. Ben's protest was immediate, his voice rising. You can't fire her for this. I spun to face him, my resolve hardening like steel. I can and I will. And I'll be looking for a good lawyer in the morning. The words felt final, like closing a door I could never reopen. His face paled, the gravity of my words sinking in. Anna, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out. There's nothing to talk about, I said, cutting him off. My voice was calm, but inside, my heart was breaking, not just for the betrayal, but for the life I had thought we were building together. I turned and walked out, leaving Ben and Tessa in the dim glow of the office, the weight of my decision settling over me like a heavy but necessary cloak. You've made your choices, I said, my voice steady as I faced Ben in the dimly lit office. Now you get to live with them. I didn't wait for his response, didn't give him the chance to weave another flimsy excuse. With my head held high, I walked out of Sugar Haven, the faint sound of Ben calling my name fading into the background like a distant echo. The night air was cool against my skin, a sharp contrast to the heat of betrayal burning in my chest. Each step away from the shop felt like a step toward reclaiming my life. The morning after I caught Ben with Tessa dawned bright and clear, the sunlight streaming through my windows in a cruel mockery of the turmoil within. I had spent the night at my rental property, a small apartment I'd kept as a safety net, a decision that now felt like a lifeline. Sitting at my kitchen table, a mug of coffee growing cold in my hands, I stared at my phone as it buzzed with a new message. It was from Ben. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to sever the connection entirely, but curiosity got the better of me. The message was a photo of a bank letter addressed to Ben, the words "Final Notice, Immediate Repayment Required," bolded in stark black ink. Beneath it he had typed, "We need to talk. This is serious." My stomach twisted, not with surprise, but with the weight of inevitability. I typed back a curt "on my way" and steeled myself for what was coming. This wasn't about reconciliation, it was about facing the consequences of their recklessness. When I arrived at Sugar Haven, the familiar tinkle of the bell felt hollow, like a memory of better days. Ben and Linda were already there, pacing the shop like caged animals, their faces etched with desperation. Linda spotted me first, her expression souring as I stepped inside. "So, you decided to show up, did you?" she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. I nodded, holding her gaze without flinching. "You wanted to talk. I'm here." Ben thrust the bank letter toward me, his hands trembling slightly. "The bank's coming down hard, Anna. We could lose everything, the shop, the house, all of it." I scanned the letter, the numbers staring back at me like an old enemy. They were staggering but not surprising, a grim confirmation of the financial hole they dug. "So, what's your plan?" I asked, my tone neutral, though my mind was already racing with the implications. Linda's plan, it seemed, was to pin the blame on me. "We wouldn't be in this mess if you'd just helped us when we asked," she said, her eyes narrowing into slits. "Your inheritance could have fixed this." I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the quiet shop. "I told you, Linda, I'm not bailing you out without a stake in the business. You don't get to demand my money and offer nothing in return." Ben ran a hand through his hair, his expression one of defeat. "Anna, I thought you could pay it off, just to get us through." The audacity of his words reignited my anger. "And where was this we, when you were spending money we didn't have?" I said, my voice sharp. "When you were hiring your friends for fun, or sneaking around with Tessa behind my back. You don't get to play the family card only when it suits you." Ben opened his mouth to respond but stopped, his eyes dropping to the floor, guilt written across his face. Linda, however, wasn't ready to back down. She stepped closer, her voice low and venomous. "You're being unreasonable, Anna. This is a family business." I met her challenge with a calm I barely felt, my heart pounding in my chest. "Family?" I said, my voice steady. "Where was this family when your son was betraying me? When you were both treating Sugar Haven like your personal bank account?" We'll figure something else out, but my inheritance is off the table. Ben muttered, almost to himself. You'll have to. I agree, I said, my resolve hardening. Then Linda did something unexpected. Her lips curved into a smile, but it was cold, devoid of warmth. Fine, she said, her voice clipped. But if you're not going to help, you're out. We'll manage without you. You're fired. The word hung in the air, sharp and final. I stared at her, letting the silence stretch, then matched her smile with one of my own. Okay. Their surprise was almost comical. Just like that, Ben asked, his voice incredulous, as if he'd expected me to beg for my place. Just like that, I confirmed, my tone unwavering. But let me make one thing clear. I took photos of you and Tessa. I have records of every dollar you've wasted, every reckless decision you've made. If you think you can fire me and sweep this under the rug, you're gravely mistaken. Linda's smile vanished, her face paling. You wouldn't dare, she hissed. Oh, but I would, I said, my voice low and firm. And when I leave, I'm taking my hard work with me. You can explain to the bank why the business is about to tank without the person who is actually running it. I turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind me with a satisfying thud, leaving them to face the wreckage of their choices. Months passed, and life took on a new rhythm, one far removed from the sticky sweet world of Sugar Haven. The crisp rustle of papers, the hum of focused conversations, the satisfaction of a crisis managed and resolved, these had replaced the scent of sugar and spice. I sat in my new office, a sleek space that stood in stark contrast to the cluttered back room of the confectionery, my nameplate reading, Anna Carter, Crisis Manager, in bold letters. The work suited me, each challenge a puzzle to solve, each victory a reminder of my own resilience. My phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. The caller ID showed Claire, a former employee at Sugar Haven, and the only one I still kept in touch with. Her voice carried a mix of pity and unease when I answered. Hey, Anna. You haven't heard, have you? About Sugar Haven? My heart gave a small lurch, a remnant of the past stirring. No, what happened? I asked, bracing myself. They closed down last week, Claire said. The bank foreclosed on the shop. And the house, too. I leaned back in my chair, a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't realized was still there. The news wasn't surprising, but it carried a quiet finality. I see, I said, my voice steady. And Ben? Linda? Claire hesitated. They're not doing great. Rumor has it they've moved in with Ben's aunt. No one's seen them much. I sighed, a complex mix of emotions swirling within me, relief, sadness, and a faint trace of vindication. Thanks for letting me know, Claire. She paused, then added, Anna, everyone knows you were the heart of that place. It was never the same after you left. A small, bittersweet smile touched my lips. I appreciate you saying that. How about you? Found a new job yet? Yeah, she said, her voice brightening. I'm working at a bakery downtown. It's not Sugar Haven, but it's a start. That's great to hear, I said warmly. You always had a talent for baking. I'm sure you'll shine there. We chatted for a few more minutes, reminiscing about the good days at the shop before they were overshadowed by betrayal and mismanagement. After we said goodbye, I hung up and gazed out my office window at the bustling street below, the city alive with possibility. A knock at my door broke my reverie. My assistant poked her head in. Your 3 o'clock is here, Anna. Thanks, send them in, I said, shaking off the last traces of nostalgia. The clients, a husband and wife team, entered with worried expressions, their small business teetering on the edge of collapse. I stood to greet them, my professional demeanor slipping into place like a well-worn coat. We've heard great things about you, Anna, the wife said as we sat down, a flicker of hope in her eyes. They say you're the best crisis manager in town. I smiled, the title fitting comfortably, a testament to the path I'd carved for myself. I'll do my best to live up to that reputation, I said. Now, tell me about your business, and let's see how we can turn things around. As they spoke, I listened intently, my mind already mapping out strategies, identifying solutions where they saw only obstacles. The meeting stretched on, their initial anxiety giving way to cautious optimism as we outlined a plan. They left with renewed purpose, their smiles a quiet reward for my efforts. I turned back to my desk, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Sugar Haven was gone, a chapter closed, but its collapse had set me free. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of betrayal, turning bitter trials into sweet victories. The future was mine to shape, one careful, deliberate step at a time, and I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Please feel free to comment below if you like this. Remember to like and subscribe for more.